This is deep dish, right?
Yeah, well, let's get deep.
So I'm going deep on both sides.
Mayor Freddie O'Connell, welcome back for a third time, but the first time as mayor.
The first time you caught me where we had just had the household conversation about how crazy would it be to do this, right? So I had just started really thinking seriously about it.
And if people go back and listen to that episode maybe about a year ago, you teased it a little bit. You was like, pay attention, I might have some news coming.
Well, because at that point, I mean, it's funny, right? You do deep dish conversations.
Yeah.
We had a household conversation, and my challenge to myself in that period after we agreed under one roof with Constituent Prime that we would look at this, it was like, all right, if you're serious about this, I'm going to now go have 100 more conversations with people.
Yeah.
And that was sort of all across my life. People had known me since I was barely old enough to remember, all the way to people I had maybe just met in the past year or doing something while I had been on Metro Council. And so it was interesting to go on that journey of those 100 additional conversations. And yours kind of happened close to the end of that, right?
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, I'm getting really good feedback.
Yeah.
And so then it was so interesting to have this work out there.
And know what's crazy is, like, we all know Nashville is a major city, but it's still like a small town. And
Reminded of that every day.
From as long as like we've known each other, we found out that you went to NBA with my cousin, my older cousin, Michael Goodwin, in basketball and stuff. So it's like,
Who went on to play for Fisk.
Yeah, went on to play
and
with
all
Fisk. Yep, exactly. And so, Mayor, I want to start off this conversation with a recap. I'm curious. You know, you was on a campaign for probably over a year, running for mayor. Did you learn anything about Nashville or Nashvillians that you possibly maybe wasn't aware of or learned more about during that campaign trail that you didn't know as a council person?
Well, yeah, and I think two things I'll say about that spring to mind immediately. One, I'm trying to even remember who. I had a conversation close to the end. It might have been, I think that's what it was. Another conversation. The first person I sort of called publicly when I was, this is funny too, I was in the house and I think we had just finished up something around the dining room table. And I kind of said, you know what, screw it, and walked out on the front porch and I called Cassie Stevenson at the Tennessean to kind of say, you know, here's what's going to happen next.
Right.
And so it was sort of to semi-formally announce that I was going to run for mayor. It was honestly more spur of the moment than I would even have guessed that I would do.
Yeah.
But it was just something where I was like, all right, I'm going to walk out on the front porch and make a phone call. And she reminded me just around the time of the inauguration, maybe sometime right after the election, you said back then that this would be a test of whether your politics scale. And I think that was maybe the most interesting thing, is that is kind of what we discovered.
Yeah.
As I was out all over the city, having conversations with people, listening, hearing the concerns, a lot of them fairly uniform. What I heard over and over again is not just people appreciated how thorough and prepared I was as we went into the forums and those discussions by the end of the runoff, what was a little bit more of debates. But people really appreciated the way that I try more to relate to people than I try to just be a politician, I guess. I mean, it's so interesting. Today, even at an event, we were over with the YWCA celebrating 125 years and their network of allies who was there with them today. And just as I was leaving because we had to kick off another Metro program, finish lunch, get through sort of all the formal remarks, and there was going to be a panel discussion that I couldn't stay for. But one of the photographers, as I'm leaving, says, "You just have a really good energy with people," and those things are related. But I think what we discovered was that, hey, this approach to politics actually might scale, at least to a citywide level, and that's kind of amazing. The other piece that's related to that is there is no question that the other thing that we stayed focused on, the idea of a Nashville for Nashvillians, resonated deeply. It really resonated.
Okay, Mayor, this is one of those things too. I think people, especially like myself, who's from Nashville, what does that mean, Nashville for Nashvillians? Because we know we've made a lot of conservative decisions as far as the growth, business and economically. Tourism, number one money generator here. So you hear a lot of people saying, what about the people who've been here, who live here, that's not gonna, go on Broadway and Germantown or West Nashville Nations, and we gotta stay here. we're not saving up money for a weekend and going back home and paying, for affordable housing. Like, we have to actually live here and be here. So what does that mean, making a Nashville for Nashvillians and wanting people to stay and keeping people here? Is that a program? Is that initiatives? What does that look like?
It's a few different things, and we've already started it. I mean, that was, to me, a day one focus. And so we've had a lot of discussions inside the mayor's office already about a customer-focused government in Nashville. And that means we've already talked about some things to tighten up the Hub Nashville process. Right. If you are using our 311 service hub, which is this overall great way to let people know if there is something in your community that needs attention, and it could be, hey, I see someone who needs social services, I see a pothole, there is a street light that's out. If you go to hub.nashville.gov, if you get the app on your phone, if you call 311, it is this great entry point into Metro. But I've also had my own series of frustrations with it, where I will put something, like, I'll basically open a ticket, right? And then it'll get closed. But I go out my front door the next day, and well, this thing I just reported is still there.
Right.
Why is this closed? And so we've had great conversations. One of the very first people we hired was Kedron Turner to be a constituent services coordinator in the office. One of the very first people we hired was my old friend, Dr. Isaac Adai, to focus on small business and entrepreneurs. And these are the people who are already here, right? So that our public investment strategy, the way we are structuring the mayor's office in terms of who is coming in and what they're focused on, we are trying to make the approach be very much anchored in the experience of people who are here on a daily basis. It's at our inauguration. One of my absolute favorite things was we wanted to make transit free, to demonstrate that this isn't, there's an opportunity to do more than just think about, hey, we're going to drive somewhere and park. We had promos for our bike share, right? And that was very conscious about how we set that up, because we're trying to do a program across whole of Metro now that says, if you're going to do a public meeting, don't just tell me where I can park. Tell me how this is accessible, right? And so there's a little bit of access, there's a little bit of transparency that's in that, but it's also, we're thinking about this from a deeper customer service perspective, and I think that is all very important. We had this list of 15 fixes we intended to make, and so same thing. We have already had one of the best ways to think about affordable housing is the easiest type of affordable housing to offer is the kind that already exists. But if you're on a fixed income and property values in your neighborhood continue to go up, when your property value goes up, the obligation on the tax, even if the tax rate goes down, if your value goes up high enough, it can mean you're going to wind up paying more in property taxes.
That's a good assessment that I haven't heard many people talk about is income, wages. Because this one thing that, okay, if things are coming more expensive,
Yep.
right, inflation, things happen. But if my wages and my income are staying the same over 5, 10, 15-year period of time, well, everything's going to eventually become unaffordable.
This is why the Office of Opportunity and what Dr. Adai is doing is going to be so important, and we are hoping to do all of these things at the same time. So one thing we're doing that we have already reviewed a game plan for in the mayor's office is ahead of the 2025 property tax assessment. We are going to work with our staff capacity in the mayor's office, the data that is available across multiple metro departments, and we are going to try to maximize the enrollment in this program because we have an important moment.
Right.
Representative Harold Love was one of the key leaders in the state legislature who got, it used to be you could only participate in this program that allows you to freeze your property taxes to the tune of about $42,000 a year. Well, cost of living has gone up way above that for people who have retired.
Right.
If you're a Metro retiree, if you worked for a Metro department for 30 years, and you've got a pension benefit, well, that may be fixed or not increasing on where inflation has taken you, and your property values have probably gone up, as
Right.
they have in much of the city. And so what Representative Love did was change this state-controlled dial that says now you can freeze your property tax rates if your income is up to $60,000. Well,
Yeah.
that's going to invite hundreds more Nashvillians into a program where for perpetuity, they can avoid that cost of living increase that comes through property value increases and thereafter property
Right.
tax increases.
What can businesses do to be part of the solution when it comes to wages and incomes, right? Because as mayor, you know, there's limitations when it comes to those type of things. You can't say, hey, organization, you need to be paying a more
Right.
of a comfortable wage and not a survival wage, right? So what can organizations here do or be a part of the mayor's office in saying, hey, what does a comfortable wage look like, and like what is a survival wage, and how can we figure out how to get people more to that comfortable wage, which I think is more of like $40 an hour, and that survival wage is around $20 at this particular moment.
So there is a Nashville Living Wage Coalition. I think a lot of times there's real value in
Yeah.
these certification programs.
Yeah.
And so, and this wasn't it wasn't always an across the board success model, but I think there was something to it when we were trying to emerge from COVID, and we knew how many physical presence businesses, if you were a restaurant, if you were in retail, there was this program that the CVC initiated called Good to Go. And basically, if you met a series of, hey, we have these policies and procedures in effect in our business, you could get Good to Go certified to say, hey, we're ready to reopen safely. Well, that's a good indicator to say, hey, if I'm concerned about my personal health, I know in this business, if I'm wearing a mask, they're going to be very tolerant of that, knowing
Right.
that there were several controversial things that happened in terms of public response to COVID protocols. Similarly, you know, we've had a handful of restaurants in Nashville that have wanted to demonstrate their commitment to sustainable practices, right? I think those kinds of certifications are very valuable. We're going to be looking at that. We know from a workforce perspective that federally certified apprenticeship programs tend to be those that get you into good paying jobs,
Right.
particularly in the building trades. And so as we develop our Office of Opportunity, we are definitely going to be looking at things on the wage side while we're also trying to bring down costs.
I want to get into that relatability part of just who you are as a person, right? And I'm curious is that you being so relatable, people being able to open up to you just like kind of like broach you, you know, in pretty much in any type of way. Now being mayor, have you thought about that balance of approachability and helping people that always maybe knew you as Freddie or council person Freddie understand that, hey, now it's mayor. Does that even matter to you? Or is there like a balance to keep of that professionalism so people understand the new capacity that you're in and like put some respect on that?
I'm torn about that one because for me at a personal level,
Yeah.
I don't care as deeply about that. I do think there are times when tone and expectation matter, but I will say too, as a father,
Yeah.
you know, you get that opportunity at a very personal family level where there are times when it is very important. Sometimes we are out and we are just having fun as a family. And then there are other times where I think it is actually important to have a moment be a learning opportunity about what respect is, why it matters, the context in which it is important. And this is to me not that far off from that in the sense of, you know, and it's interesting because there's a balance too where I have, you know, as somebody who will sometimes be irreverent or have a sense of humor about things, I think a lot harder now about if I'm going to go jump into something and be even a little bit silly, you sort of almost have to check, wait, has anything really heavy happened in the world right now? Like you have to, there's almost more of there's that weight of the world element of it.
Yeah.
But I think that also circles back to a thing that even in these first few weeks I've thought a lot about, which is there is a real weakness of the official statement. There are times when it's fundamentally necessary. But in fact, the difficulty of processing, for instance, we're having this conversation just a few weeks out from October 7th. And this is a moment where we are all still processing the local impact of global conflict. And there, issuing statements is not as helpful to me as having conversations.
Right.
And so there is this, how do we build the capacity within the mayor's office to support really difficult conversations when a lot of people are saying not only must you act quickly, you must issue a statement. That is what public leadership is. And I'm not in a space where I agree with that. I'm in a space where, in fact, making a statement may make things worse because you may be making a statement that is only in one direction, or at least perceived as being only in one direction when...
Could be premature.
Well, yes, you may not have all the information. We've already seen that several times. This is very difficult, whether it is Israel-Palestine, whether it is Russia-Ukraine, whether it is any of the hot spots around the world right now where we have this great diverse Nashville community that is interconnected globally. And I feel like I don't want to be the first one to comment. I may want to not go out and just have a crisp statement. I may want to bring some people in to the mayor's office who are community leaders, and then go have a series of conversations.
Do you feel that it's a different type of weight and pressure on you because of your record of being a council person? And when I say record, good record, right? And being from here, right? I think when you're from a place, I think it's just a different feeling, especially when you take a decision-making position or the top leadership of that position as yourself as mayor of Nashville. Do you feel that you have more grace, less grace with Nashvillians, or somewhere in between? Because I know you're 10 weeks in, the honeymoon phase is fading away a little bit at this point. A lot of things have happened, in those 10 weeks. A lot of statements being given. And so, I'm curious about how do you feel about that, as far as you feel that pressure is a little different because of your past roles and you're from here, and that, expectations to maybe make decisions, and maybe once you make a decision that people don't agree with for the first time, like, are people being unfair about that because of prior decisions you've made that were in their favor, especially the constituents that you represented?
So what's interesting to me is not that the weight is different from my background and approach as a council member. The feeling that I've had that maybe has surprised me is twofold. One, that people do seem to want public leadership in the form of statements, which that has surprised me a little bit, because it's not ever been a thing that I've done. And so I think they're in two different ways. The weight is from the office itself, that
Right.
I am now one of the chief stewards of anything that has to do with local government in a
Don't be
large
modest,
county.
Mayor. You're the. And I said you was in the role for 10 weeks. It's 5 weeks actually, 5 weeks. But don't be modest.
But I don't
like,
look at it that
yeah.
way, because
Okay.
I look at it in two different ways. We have this amazing team that we are building that we started with more than one person on day one.
Right.
And we had some people that we are very happy chose to stay with us, and then we have added to that. And that team is 30-something. When we're done, it'll be 30 and change full-time employees in the mayor's office, and that is our team. And then there are these department heads, and some of them report to boards and commissions. They are independent. Some of them do report directly to the mayor's office. But that is its own community of leaders.
Yeah.
And then we have all of the Metro employees.
Yeah.
And then you have Metro schools over here, and you have these organizations like NES, MDHA, Airport, Transit. And so they all interrelate. And so we have our team, and then we have our working relationship with those department heads, and everybody in that ecosystem has different gradations of leadership that they're offering, and so we work within that context. But the weight comes from, there is, I think, an institutional expectation that people still put on the mayor's office, regardless of who is mayor. Now, similarly, I think there is some natural distrust of the institution of Metro that now, even though and for instance, having Bob Mendez be on our team with Chief Development Officer, also coming from a context of Metro Council, also being someone that I think carried into this role what I thought was some good public trust. Like, trust is a currency, and we value it a great deal in this administration. But I was surprised by two things. We got, even in working as hard as we could and doing everything we knew to do to protect the institution of civilian oversight, there was a weekend where things got real tense all of a sudden. And also, our communications capacity is we staff up. My personal capacity is we have staffed up. Week over week, we get a little bit of relief for each person that comes on board. But there is a reality to short staffing, even with as good as the transition process was, as helpful as the outgoing administration was. And we know the state is what has created this. And so it was a little bit interesting to get all of the, to experience all of that emotional charge with not a lot of grace. And then similarly, I think as we have processed all of the emotional energy associated with the conflict in Israel and Palestine, that saying nothing is not appropriate. To say anything is going to be fraught depending on where you occupy the space of who you're elevating, who you're supporting, and nothing is fast enough. And so I think we're still trying to get that balance of speed and appropriate, right?
But if there's people, which unfortunately there's always these type of people that they're waiting for something to come up to criticize you, or to question your leadership or capabilities, and so I think that's a little bit part of it too.
But I come to the job, and I guess that's the interesting thing is we're coming in knowing that at some point, we will be involved in a controversial thing that even the spirit of the campaign may be challenged. And maybe there may be some validity to that challenge, to that criticism, right?
Yeah.
But the speed and then, we want to hang on to a space
Yeah.
of general trust, and we want to be broadly transparent. I mean, there wasn't any period where we were trying to hide something or covering it up. We were learning. We were picking up. We were saying, hey, what is possible?
Right.
What is legal? What is necessary? And how can we make this best for all the current employees who are impacted? What is the consequences and fallout of state action that we had no control over?
Right.
And I think maybe that's also part of it, is just we think about our ability to share what we know, what we've discovered, and every single day. And it's hard to do that brain dump in a way that you can talk about every single day and have it all be understood, appreciated, shared.
Well, I think that's why this is important, right? Having individuals like yourself and others that are in those top decision-making leadership roles, elected leadership roles, to be able to help Nashvillians, help voters understand processes a lot of times, which we may be delusional about, sometimes, or just don't understand, or really just don't understand the capacity and expectations and restrictions that some of our decision makers actually have, and I think there's just some learning and unlearning.
Well, and it's interesting too, because I think maybe this is also you learn from history and you assume it's just going to be exactly the same as, we've had a lot of people go out and say something over here that I know personally, and it's like, did you want to reach out? Because I'm still right here.
Let's talk about some of that over there stuff, right? You brought up some of your team. You brought up staffing. Right. And one of the first things that came out that I was like, oh wow, it's heating up. Honeymoon phase over with, right? He's officially the mayor at this point, right? Once you criticize, you're the mayor.
Yep.
About the lack of diversity in the mayoral administration, I definitely want to give you an opportunity to address that.
Yeah.
And once I seen it, right, I said, okay. They showed all the faces, I said, okay. And then I went to the website, because I want to say, well, has it even been updated, right? And at that particular moment, the website hadn't been updated.
Yep.
Still seen people that I knew was no longer a part of the mayoral administration, that was part of the previous administration still on there. So I was like, well, the mayor just started, I'm not sure, but like it was a hell of a headline.
Yep.
And it drew a lot of clicks. It got a click from me. And so so I'm curious about, I want to talk about diversity in general, but I want to let's start with the mayoral administration, and then how you received that, and then what does it look like today?
So that was very hard, because you remember too when we went back to the conversation that was at local distro, right? And it was good news, bad news, because we literally tried to hire intentionally diverse people we knew were experienced political staff, and inevitably they got better offers from campaigns that could afford to pay more. Now, the good news in some ways, again, for us was it wound up where budgets were. We wound up in a space where we had the opportunity to work with generally younger staff with less experience, but a lot of energy. And it turned out that energy was very shared by a lot of the city. And we were so encouraged by the end of it that we saw an uptick in youth vote participation. That was great. Yeah. But I sat there that night knowing we hadn't hit our staff goals, and I agonized it with Marjorie Pomeroy Wallace, who was our campaign manager and then became our chief of staff. Now, I'll say this, though. She built a hell of a team. And we, together as partners, built a team that I was incredibly proud of, that by the end of things did, I think, reflect a lot of Nashville's diversity. That wasn't always in the sequence we wanted, and it wasn't always with the experience we had hoped to get, because people were just getting better offers. And then that meant on day one, Marjorie as chief of staff, a couple of people that we kept from the Cooper administration were in roles that we kept them in.
Right.
And in some cases, those were more senior, and in some cases, they were less senior. But we did not get asked to comment on that article. That article certainly did not include the people that we kept from the Cooper administration that were people of color.
Right.
So there was zero acknowledgement of diversity elsewhere. And it also, landing at 1 week, we had people who we already knew were committed, like Isaac, that we could not announce yet because they had professional circumstances that required them to give 2 weeks' notice.
Right.
I think by the end of this, when we hit a nearly fully staffed mayor's office, when we have everybody on the team or anticipated to be joining the team by the start of 2024, we're going to have an administration that we hope is reflective of what the Metro Human Relations Commission was trying to illustrate when they put out the first Inclusivics report about diversity in Metro.
Right.
And even then, it will be hard because across Nashville's many communities of color representing multiple races and ethnicities, when you have 30-something people on a single team, you can't possibly have someone from every faith tradition, every race and ethnicity, every, gender and orientation, all of those things.
And it's a numbers game with the demographic of Nashville, right?
But we are being intentional.
Yeah.
And so I think even today, there are some staff announcements that we can't make publicly yet, but in a few weeks, I think people are going to be, if not satisfied, impressed even by the team that we have assembled.
And what you're telling me too is that, if during the campaign time, if, there was other people of color that just took more money and said, hey,
and that's great for them.
Yeah, that's great for them. But that lets me know too, as a city, we need to do more leadership training and organizing around those, which I know there's organizations doing it. So when opportunities become available, there are trained, ready to go individuals that can take on those roles that are from, people of color communities, just like any other tech and all these other, type of jobs.
The flip side of that, though, is you've already seen some maturity in the marketplace in some of these things, not just in political staff.
Right.
Some of our first phone calls, I'm here to tell you, we made to people of color that it turns out we can't afford.
Yeah.
Again, this is a good problem in the marketplace of talent in Nashville. It is a challenging problem when we are trying to be intentional because we have a great candidate. And when we go have the conversation, they're in a space where they've already outpaced what a public sector opportunity might look like.
Right. Yeah.
Again, that is challenging as we try to hit our staffing goals, but it's really good for the people that are in that position.
Yeah, and anybody doesn't know, you don't get in the public sector to make a lot of money. You get in there to serve.
Let me tell you what I've learned about how successful some of the people I know are, because we had some people in a talent pool that I knew personally that I was hoping we could recruit in, and there's a gap that exists between what we can offer. Now, we can offer still at a level that I think we're going to be able to staff at, but what has impressed me is how there are a lot of people that have taken full advantage of Nashville's opportunity spectrum.
Yeah. Now, Nashville is said to be a progressive city, a liberal city. I always say, great, prove it to me, right? You got to show me. As we think about embracing diversity as just community members, right? I think we are very diverse city, but I think we're very segregated diverse city still. I think there are a lot of people that are still in silos. They're clusters, cliques, however you want to call it. So I'm interested how the mayor's office can be a facilitator of opening up community, right? And allowing people to have proximity to other communities that maybe they wouldn't necessarily have proximity to. And I think that proximity is important because as me being an explorer of social change in general, I think the way you embrace diversity and understand implicit biases or understand your blind spots is you have to have proximity to people that you may not necessarily look like, think like, believe in the same faith, and that's not saying you have to agree and come to an understanding, but it helps you empathize when something happens and a social issue in that community, and you can say, oh, I was able to talk to that person. I spent time. I get it. I understand, and it adds a whole different type of context. And I think people in Nashville, and this is not in Nashville, all across the globe, is struggling and trying to find a way. How do I become and explore social change? One, you listen to the Deep Dish Conversation podcast, but like, I'm curious from the mayoral standpoint of like, how do you help people become explorers of social change and become more intentional, or help them have a guide of embracing diversity in a different way?
Yeah, that is something I have spent so much time thinking about, because I think about my own personal journey.
Yeah.
And moving over not just to Salem Town, but to 37208 16 years ago, and starting to be a part of the fabric of that segment of North Nashville before I ever had the obligation to represent it and the opportunity to represent it, really put me in some spaces that challenged me, but taught me and caused me to grow. And all of that still carries with me into this. And I think about a few different things. I'm trying to think, I believe we had made 4 commitments to have regular meetings with sort of community organizations. We agreed, as I think mayors have for several cycles now, to meet regularly with NOAA. Working to get that off the ground right now. We made a commitment to meet regularly with the Buffalo PAC, which has historically supported primarily African American candidates.
You made sweats.
Made sweats. Had a couple good conversations over there. There is a relatively new political action committee built around an organization called Young, Black, and Gifted.
Oh, yeah, yep.
All right, so they asked for a regular meet. They also asked for a commitment to participate in the transition process, which we have honored. And we have Rob on one of our transition committees, which has been great. And even as the kickoff, seeing his level of participation was fantastic. And then the Chamber of Commerce asked us to meet regularly. Now, those are 4 very different organizations. And they target different segments of the community. And then I will say, too, I don't think they made a structured ask around this, but we had a lot of support from the Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition. And so it's interesting. So today, before we came over to this, one of the events on my calendar was the Chamber's P2030 annual event, right? And so this is a partnership-based program, and it was very fascinating. The topic today was collaboration in the age of AI. But they also put up their framework for what P2030 has. And the foundational element of that framework is deep prosperity. And if you look into it, and we'll see to your point, saying that and seeing the things that are built into that foundational element, later we'll say, was that just words on paper, or were they, as an organization, committed to those principles? But deep prosperity is what our Office of Opportunity is fundamentally about. Now, if we take that and we look at the conversation with NOAA, which you wouldn't usually say NOAA and the Chamber are going to think about anything in the same outlook, and then you look at Buffalo PAC, which is talking about specifically opportunity for
Black
organizations,
people,
Black organizations and businesses that have not always enjoyed a cozy relationship with Metro. You are, and then you think about Young, Black, and Gifted, where the first word in that is young, and these are people that I think are going to be where you are in looking at scaling, but they are seeing Nashville's opportunity, and they want to make sure, again, that whether it is policy or whether it is funding, incentives, anything like that, that there is truly access to that. There is some proximity that you get to build structure around that. The mayor's office has tremendous convening power, and I am excited to have that whole collection of conversations as well as some others over the next 4 years.
I want to switch gears to public safety, because I think a lot has happened within our public safety sector. I'll start with the one that happened. It's still some ongoing processes, but the COB, Community Oversight Board. Where are we on that? I know it was been attacked from all different angles before you became the mayor. But I would just like to give community an opportunity to hear from you.
Yep.
Where we are in that process? Where is there a solution? Is there a final plan with the COB and the executive director, Jill Fisher?
Right. So you are probably aware the state passed a law
Right.
in this most recent session that partially dismantled the existing process of civilian oversight across the state. We had
Right.
a community oversight board, Metro Nashville Community Oversight, MNCO, with an executive director and a staff. And we had a charter amendment a few years ago that established this, including the baseline budget for it. Council had since, with mayor's office, I think generally supportive of this, advanced that budget a little bit. And the state pulled the rug out from under that entire process. It changed public information requirements. It changed the ability to have legal review in some circumstances and even legal counsel. And so in order to respond to state law and be compliant there in a way that, after talking to our law department, it would be very, very difficult to win a lawsuit on the principle that we are fighting some of the nearby lawsuits about local authorities, because this did have statewide impact. I mean, frankly, it is very likely that the state has fully constitutional right to do what they did. Now, they didn't take civilian oversight out of the picture altogether. And so what they did allow for was, if we move swiftly by an October 29th deadline, we can maintain a civilian review board. Now, it will not be as broad of a scope, but there are a few concerns here. One, it dismantles an existing department, and in order to replace it, there is a little bit of a necessary HR hiccup, but we have worked to minimize that. You probably saw some headlines about people getting notices of resignation or whatever. We double, triple checked, and again, this is not just me sitting there blindly trusting folks. This is us having multiple staff, other people come in, talking directly to the chair of the existing COB. And the new Civilian Review Board will have 7 members. They are already all appointed. In just a few days, on October 27th, they will meet as a new board. Ideally, they will take my recommendation, which is to reappoint Director Fitchard, who was the old COB director, MNCO, as the new director of that CRB. She will almost immediately be able to pull her existing staff under the authority of that new Civilian Review Board. And if there is the HR hiccup, it may mean 1 business day of loss of employment for some of those staff.
Okay.
But we have to do that by October 29th under that state enforced mandate. And on the other side of that, we should be able to be fully compliant with law, limit the impact to current Metro employees. So we've worked closely with SAIU on this process too, the Metro employee union that represents most people who are its members. We have worked with the chair of the oversight board. We have worked with Director Fitchard, and I have had direct outreach to advocates about this. So I have been committed to this from day one. We have been diligent and thorough, trying to take care of employees and trying to structure this in a way that maximizes the ability for this new entity in Metro to be successful in a way that is still consistent with state law.
Have you thought about ways to, if Director Fisher is, if the board takes your recommendation, she would be in the new capacity.
Right.
Have you thought about ways to, I guess, make this new community oversight board relationship maybe a little better with MNPD and not be so contentious as it's been in the past, with just being able to get things reviewed? And
we've thought about that, but this is where the state piece has complicated it.
Okay.
The state has made it very challenging to allow for select review in the way that they used to be able to get things that wouldn't necessarily have to be publicly disclosed.
Yeah.
And we have to be very careful about having active investigations, suspects, personal information in a place where it is not fully public information.
Yeah.
We will be looking at that. I will say it this way. My first priority has been hit that October 29th deadline.
Right.
Land this plane, get Director Fitchhurd online as new director with a staff department,
Right.
and make sure we preserve the right to that civilian review board.
Yeah.
And then the next set of conversations, we've talked about a few things. We said, yes, what are we legally able to do, and what would trigger a legal response from the state? We're still looking at some of those opportunities. The next thing is, can we actually have that new entity help us with some of the community safety initiatives that were not only in place already, some of them in pilot periods,
Right.
that we want to drive as permanent programs. This is things like violence interruption,
Right.
particularly group violence interruption.
Right.
This is the initiative of the village, right? And so we think there may be some opportunities there to, even if the state has limited that oversight scope so that it is now review,
Yeah.
can we still have some useful policy opportunities that really do make that staff opportunity a big deal?
I want to give you an opportunity too. I know you put out a statement, but a lot of things have transpired over the last couple of days with Chief
Yep.
Drake personally.
Yep.
Right, and you're seeing from a community. I'm curious if you're receiving this on your end of, because of the optics. Once you have a personal family member, in his case, his son, take violent offenses against 2 police officers in
Yep.
Laverne, and you're the chief of police in Nashville.
Yeah.
The optics, he's a grown man, 30-year-old, man. There's only so much a parent can do for an adult child, right?
Yep.
At that age, people, because of the optics, people may say, hey, maybe they may directly correlate that situation of parenting with his ability to do his job from a policing standpoint, right? And I truly believe, I think there's 2 separate things. But if you maybe don't like Chief Drake or don't like policing in general, maybe this is the opportunity for you to take that jab and say, hey, Mayor O'Connell, we need a new chief. What are your thoughts about the situation, and what are your thoughts on Chief Drake at this particular time leading our MNPD department?
I mean, I'll say it this way. I know firsthand how challenging it is to, one, meet my own very high expectations I have of myself as a father, right? There are times when I lose my cool when I know I shouldn't, right? And that can be either as a partner or a parent. And then I know from watching my friends grow up to get to this point where not only have we completed the journey of childhood and adolescence, but also gone all the way through young adulthood and have become parents. I've got so many families that I'm surrounded by where you would look at everything on the table and say, these parents have had sufficient resources where there may not have been a profound struggle. Basically, the number of adverse childhood experiences is very low. You would not look and say this is a family that has A scores, and yet there may be multiple children and one child in that family, despite everybody's best efforts, including parents, siblings, people around, has chronic challenges with substance abuse, has chronic challenges that may put them in a scenario where they are regularly committing crimes against others, not even just making personal choices we might criticize, but truly being in a position where they harm others. My personal journey as a parent makes it very hard for me to pass judgment on that because you just never know. I mean, we are very fortunate, at least so far, with our daughters, that they have generally made good choices. I don't know what special concoction that my parents put in our milk, but if I could bottle it and sell it to others, I would, because they gave my brother and me both a framework growing up where we got to have, again, if you look at the low ACE scores model,
Yeah.
we were there, but we also had whatever went into that process of helping us make good choices.
Yeah.
But I know other parents who have done exactly the same thing
Different outcomes.
and different outcomes. And so I don't pass a lot of judgment on that. I am as concerned in the sense of, and we had talked about this at length, we went up and down the chain. So one, different jurisdiction, but we did not want to have any scenario where there could be questions about different or special treatment. And in fact, right now, I think one of the biggest concerns is if there is a violent crime and there is still a lead suspect or multiple suspects, I don't want to have a high risk of more violent crimes occurring, right? Like, it is in everybody's interest to have violent crime be a low probability outcome here. And I do have some concerns more broadly about the scenario of, as we sit here and have this conversation, the last update I had heard was that this is still a scenario where no one has been apprehended.
Yeah.
And that is also challenging because I know that's putting pressure on the chief still.
Right.
It is putting pressure on the department. It is
Right.
putting pressure on me because
Yeah.
we still have a situation where we hope there is not another violent incident
Right.
out there somewhere in the future. And so I'm thinking too about not just the personal scenario that Chief Drake is encountering, which I can tell you must be incredibly difficult
Yeah.
as a father,
Yeah.
as a professional, but then this other public safety element of it that we also want to give full attention to.
Yeah. I want to give you a chance to close it out with this. And one, I want a commitment. So we talking about, I'm going to put on my community organizer hat. I want a commitment that you'll come on the Deep Dish Conversations podcast at least once a quarter.
I'll talk this over with Alex. Let me say it this way.
Okay.
I sit here and I think that should be doable.
Okay.
As we've said,
Okay.
you may know this, WPLN asks us for a monthly commitment. We're trying to do that Ask the Mayor segment with them every month. We have been trying to stick to a commitment of a Friday press briefing every
Right.
week. There may be a month
I just want you once every 3 or 4 months. Is it?
I think this will probably be doable. I will say too, though, I want to be sensitive. Like, I don't want to. If that works for you and your audience, that's great. I also don't want to oversaturate it so people are like, oh, he's just going to say the same thing.
No, I don't, because I think, for one, I will not allow that to happen.
Very good.
I will
Very
not allow that
good.
to happen because the questions will be different every time. But two, like, again, like, it's still what,
But
80 people a day is still moving here. I think people just,
So 30
ahead.
days in, the only thing I would say is I have to be now probably more rigorous than ever before about what my daily calendar, my weekly calendar, my monthly calendar look like.
Yeah.
Now, across 3 months, we can probably find an hour.
yeah,
right?
yeah, that's all I want. That's all.
Well, I just say it like this, though. I think back to the most disruptive thing that I think I've ever seen in all of my time in Nashville from a public policy standpoint, COVID.
Yeah.
We were just going through this review of executive orders. Well, it turns out almost everything that happened there that involved a curfew or a change in how business. If you go back and look at every mayor over the 60-year history of Metro and executive orders, Mayor Cooper went through, and you'll remember, the daily rhythm of press briefings that lasted more than a quarter.
Yeah.
I will say my prayer for Nashville for the next 4 years was that we enjoy a boring existence. And if that prayer is not fulfilled, there could be a moment, and I just don't want to create upfront a promise that would be we could say
To thousands
yes,
of people, thousands
however,
of listeners.
If we have a scenario that
Listeners,
no one is
when you see
predicting.
Mayor
Give
O'Connell,
grace.
when you see Mayor O'Connell, ask him, are you coming on Deep Dish
Yeah,
Conversation?
yeah.
When you see him, when our listeners, when you see him in public at these events, you ask him.
The early, easy commitment is yes, just give us grace if we go through something that needs all of my time.
Closing out question, what are things you want Nashvillians to be asking you to hold you accountable? over these first 4 years?
I think the biggest ones fit very much into our theme. Are we, like, was that 15 fixes thing just a nice little talking point, or were those real? Well, right now today, I can tell you, 30 days in, my staff knows they're real. We have had multiple conversations. I think metro departments are working to understand their role in delivering these things. But do that. Look at our 3 transition committees. We've got focus on how Nashville grows, how Nashville works, how Nashville moves. Before Thanksgiving, we are expecting to receive input from people working outside of government, knowing that those are priorities where we hope to have things that are very actionable. So pay attention to those things. Those 3 committees should each produce, like, there is a work product we are expecting out of that that we then intend to take action on. And I think similarly, we made a pretty big commitment that we talked about at the outset of Nashville for Nashvillians. There will be some things that feel like they don't fit that paradigm, I'm sure, over the next 4 years. But look at, did we succeed in making Hub Nashville a better customer service tool? Did we succeed in making broadly reliability within local government, whether it's trash and recycling or the rate at which potholes get filled? Did we see improvements in 4 years? And by the end of this, is Nashville on the right track or the wrong track? We hope to get to a very clear yes.
Mayor Freddie O'Connell, thank you for your time as always.
Glad to do it. Thanks for having me.